Hi everyone, welcome back. Thank you very much for tuning in again. I'm going to let you get on with this conversation I had with Gregg Cropper. He's an amazing guy from England Touch Association in the UK, and also very interesting backstory, talking about winning, talking about competition, talking about integrity and ethics. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Just a quick message again to say thank you so much for those of you who have liked and subscribed and followed me on YouTube and on the podcast. I really appreciate the support. Just trying to spread the word a bit. So if you feel like sharing it to friends and who might be interested, please do that. And please do send me in any feedback you have, any comments, suggestions, or some people that you think I should also talk to. I'm always keen for great conversations. I'm loving this hobby, I guess, for the fact that I get to talk to such cool people and have these really interesting conversations. And I'm very much happy to share those conversations with you lot. So with all that said, thank you very much. Enjoy the conversation. Hi, you're listening to Wimbledon, hosted by me, Nick Ray. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm very pleased here today to have Gregg Cropper in the house on the line, all the way from the UK. He is a friend of mine. I won't pretend we're close friends because we've been rivals on a touch field actually. And he is a fantastic gentleman who's run England Touch, which when I talk about touch, for those that aren't familiar, touch rugby is the sport, or touch footy in Australia is what they call it, touch football. It is the sport that I fell in love with and have played relatively competitively for Switzerland. Gregg, on the other hand, is a multiple medal winner in World Cup and European Cups for England Touch, which is a much bigger deal than what anything I can hold up for Switzerland. But he's here today to talk about his journey and also obviously his insights into competition and win building. So Gregg, if I can just pass over to you to introduce yourself a little bit, tell us about your journey, where you've come from, and also your journey alongside touch, which is not a professional sport. So we all need to fund ourselves.
Very much so. Yeah, thanks, Nick. Great to join you tonight, so much appreciated for the invite. I guess a bit about myself. So I was brought up in a small town outside of Manchester in England. Played lots of sports as a kid, so I was playing rugby league, karate, even chess, all for quite a long time at a good level, playing for my county, etc. And then got to senior school, kind of dropped out of sport a little bit. My school wasn't particularly sporty, and then I wasn't really sure what to do after I'd finished kind of GCSE, so I went on to do A-levels, and kind of had enough of education to some extent. I went into vocational, so I was engineering apprentice for, that's what I went into. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. My dad was an engineer, and he enjoyed it, so I kind of followed suit. And then first week I was there, they said, "Oh, you're going back to college one day a week." I was like, "I've literally just got out of this thing." However, I loved engineering. I kind of made my way up the ranks at the company there, went on to do my degree on a company-sponsored course, became production and project manager there, and I was at the company for 19 years in total. So kind of I've been there, a long time, and I, enjoyed it. And like I said, then I kind of I started to play a bit of touch rugby in 2007-ish. A friend of mine just said, "Do you fancy a game or two?" I said, "What is it?" So it gave me a bit of an insight, went down, loved it. And then kind of at that point started to volunteer in the sport a little bit as well. So I set up my own club, Manchester Chargers in Manchester, and then realised it was a governing body of the sport, which at the time of starting just playing in the park, had no idea. And then realised that they needed a bit of assistance to grow and develop the sport. So I volunteered as marketing manager for a couple of years, and then following the 2011 World Cup in Edinburgh, put my name down for the president of England Touch, and then that's kind of where my journey started in that kind of area. So like I said, that engineer for 20 years, I was traveling the world, building, fixing, designing big budget machinery. But managing my time with that full-time job, and as well as being like the head figure, main ambassador role for England Touches business, and liaising with those, stakeholders, etc. Time management was like that critical part of all of that. Now, I won't lie, there's certainly detriment to that kind of work-life balance back then. Certainly, probably my, ability to kind of focus fully on my full-time job, friends, family relationships kind of stuff, because it was just a lot of work. But like I said, it's that kind of time management is something that I learned really early on, being able to kind of juggle both of those things. And then having built England Touch in a volunteer capacity in such a little time, I then decided to take the leap out of engineering into sport full time. So I applied for a job at the Rugby Football League for the national manager over here, responsible for all of the recreational forms of rugby, so touch, tag, masters, women's, wheelchair. And then ran a number of events across the country, corporate events at Old Trafford, half-time games at Magic Weekend. And then that was a fixed-term contract, so I left there, went to work at England Squash, major events and competition manager there. So delivered an event strategy, competition programmes. And then, again, those roles at the Rugby League and at England Squash, they were all still continuing as the England Touch president role. So again, managing my time there was still like a key part to all of that. Then January 2018, I took on the Chief Operating Officer role at England Touch, and that was a full-time paid role. First paid role that we'd had in the organisation, equally first touch organisation in the Northern Hemisphere to have a paid role. And I'd built enough sustainable income streams to make that possible. So, was able to then ramp things up, even though I was probably doing 30 hours a week volunteering on top of my full-time job. I was unable to do 40 hours a week in a paid job and then still do them volunteer as hours on the top, but obviously a little bit less so. And it just made that work-life balance, a lot healthier, because it certainly wasn't back in the day. And then, as COVID hit in 2020 early on, England Touch, then we kind of they restructured. I was made redundant from there. So at this point now, I'm just taking a bit of time out. I've got a 3-year-old daughter, Poppy, so I'm just kind of resting, refocusing a little bit on what that next challenge is. But I think looking back, it's people kind of say leave it in a better place than you found it, and I'd certainly say from an England Touch point of view, in the 12 years that I was there, I've certainly done that. So I'm kind of proud to look back on that time.
Yeah, I want to say straight up, I think you should be extremely proud. I know I've said this to you before in person, but I'll say it here on my little channel. It is amazing how much work you put in, and I think just to give some context to those people listening who aren't familiar with Touch or England Touch, it's a very large organisation. How many registered players are there in England at the moment? Like, well were they pre-COVID, I should say.
Yeah, it's funny. It depends on who you ask, and how people count numbers over here in terms of social players, registered paying players, etc. There's probably in excess of 25,000-30,000 people now playing. Again, not all registered with one governing body, registered with different ones and playing the sort of sports. But that's probably the last kind of. That's how many there is.
I mean, that's an enormous number of people. That's an enormous number of clubs and teams and organisations to bring together. And I guess where I became very familiar with England Touch in particular, you guys actually brought me in to do some drone filming when I was trying to set up a drone company.
Yeah, I remember that. And, Derek the drone.
Yeah, that's right, Derek the drone. That's what I called him. So I came in and was part of your training setup, and you did a training weekend. I also did it with Scotland Touch, and just the professionalism, with which everything was organized. You know, you guys had physios on site, you had all of the accommodations to arrange, you had all the fields to arrange, you had to get all these people from all over the country together, you had the kind of tournaments to selection for those different potential squads and things. It's massive, and I was always in awe of how you did it, because the other thing about touch, even though it's a non-professional sport and none of the players are getting paid, there's so much passion in that sport, and there's so many big personalities that there was always a lot of drama and riffs going on and things. And you know, in your position, you were bound to upset people right, left, and center. And I think you did such a great job of navigating it. So I mean, I'm maybe slightly giving you a big head over here, but I think you were fantastic, and I think, you know, you really held it so well. And obviously you had a team, you managed that team really well as well, and I know other people around you also put in so many hard yards to get there.
Yeah, most definitely. It's certainly been a team effort over the years, that's for sure.
But I think as you mentioned, the number of volunteer hours you've put in just for that sport alone is phenomenal. So yeah, the touch community owes you a great sense of gratitude there, because I think it did help Northern Hemisphere as well. You mentioned Northern Hemisphere. I mean, Wales touch as well is going great, and so is Scotland touch. You know, but I think that you all learn a lot from one another, and I can't not mention Ireland and France and all the others now. God, I'm going to get myself into trouble. But yeah, exactly, and Switzerland, obviously.
Yeah.
I think it was great, and I think also one thing that's interesting there as well is, you know, we're going to talk about obviously your philosophy on winning and competition and things, and actually being on the field, because on top of all of your volunteer work and your full-time work, you're also a player, and you're a very good player. You're a bloody sneaky, diving, quick player, which is really annoying to play against. But you had to put in a lot of time and effort to get good. You know, to remain fit enough to compete at the highest level, to remain agile and speedy enough. So that as well is no mean feat there. So I think, you know, you've got a lot of things to be proud of. Okay, so now I've kissed your ass for like 5 minutes of the podcast. I wanted to kind of move into winning a bit, and your philosophy around winning and achieving goals. I mean, you know, this podcast is not just about sport and winning, you know, tournaments and trophies, but obviously you've had your fair share of that. But I think reflecting on your life and your journey, how would you frame winning in terms of achieving goals and your philosophy around that?
Yeah, I think sometimes winning's just a result. You know, I think the real winners often are those that achieve their goals, you know, no matter how big or small they are. Like if you take, you know, an example of a sports day when, you know, a child who came last, they might see themselves as the winner because they were like, well, I've never done the hurdles before, I'm scared of them. They jumped all of the hurdles, they came last, but they won because their goal was running the hurdles. Whereas another kid can, you know, he can be actual winner, but he didn't do it, he wasn't a personal best, and he's not content with his performance. So even though he won, he doesn't feel like a winner. So I think sometimes it's just, you know, it's achieving those kind of things. It's just, some of it's a bit of a mindset, and, you know, what your goal is. And I think achieving goals and dreams and those kind of things is, you know, you need to be self-driven. You know, I think it can only be done by yourself. You know, if we just keep on sport for a second and youngsters, so many kids drop out of sport purely because they're following the goal and dream of a parent or a guardian. It's not like it's what they want. It's like, well, you know, come on son or come on daughter. That's what, you know, trying to live vicariously through your children a little bit sometimes. And I think it definitely needs to be a partnership between that person that's aiming towards whatever goal it is and the support network, be that a coach, friend, mentor, sponsor, whatever it is. You know, and certainly from a kid's point of view, it's certainly like if you don't make that selection, if you don't make the team, well, you're never going to make it without that parental, emotional, financial support. So it needs to be a team effort, and I think certainly a lot of the stuff that, you know, we do in life and in business is that team effort, and having that really strong support network that you can fall back on, or you're having a bit of a bad day and they can pick you back up. But equally, I think in terms of, achieving them goals, etc., I think unless you've experienced what it is to fail, then I don't always, and that sense of disappointment that drives you harder next time. Like I said, we were talking then around, I've played competitive for England since 2009. I've been around the sport for a long time. I'm in the kind of top 10 of people that have played for our country in terms of number of caps, etc. So I've been around the game for a long time, but I think, over that time, obviously won and lost many games. I think you always learn most from your losses. I think, we go into those games against the big powerhouse countries of, New Zealand, Australia, etc. And our win is very different than when we would play Ireland, for example, who are on a similar level, or we would play Luxembourg or Switzerland, who are a developing nation. So I think setting what that win is, is it completing your set of 6, sticking to the game plan regardless of the score, those kind of things. I think you can take that into a life and a business sense as well, because it's certainly, you're not going to win everything. You certainly need to kind of build a bit of that resilience. And I think some of this is, not being afraid to admit that you've failed, or, you've been defeated, or you've made a mistake, because we're all human. And I think it also shows just a bit of that, being transparent. It also, the rest of your team are then, you're accountable to them, for your own decisions. It's a bit of that a self-awareness piece, I think, isn't it? In terms of being flexible, adapting to them kind of changes, and pushing forwards regardless. I've always been a bit of fail fast, admit your mistakes, move on. There's always, all the lockdown and kind of just coming out of it. This year I've set quite a few challenges per month for myself. Nothing groundbreaking, but things I can look back on to that I'm grateful I've done. I can just gives me a focus of what I'm doing next month or whatever. So I've just done a half marathon last month, because I've not done one for 15 years. I thought, how am I doing? Where would it be? Funnily enough, just today we climbed the height of Snowdon up and down my stairs, just for another challenge. Another challenge. And then next month, 5k a day in June, doing a triathlon. So just keeping kind of different challenges to just keep you a bit focused. And I think my win for that month is complete that challenge. And not everything's a physical thing. It's sometimes, reading so many books, or doing certain, like doing yoga, or doing kind of learning a new skill of juggling, or something, as daft as that. But it's just, I think you need to set goals that that are achievable, but keep setting them that yourself, that you believe in.
Yeah, I think I completely agree, and I think a lot about goals. I mean, I'm a trained coach as well, not just in touch, but also in like executive coaching and personal development coaching, and that's all about setting goals and setting a good goal that is all meets all the requirements of SMART, etc. That you can look towards, that will stretch you. I like your point about don't be afraid to admit you fail. I think something interesting I've been reflecting on from a lot of the conversations I've had actually, and in this podcast, and I think you'll relate to it, or I hope you'll relate to it, is there's something around not being okay with being afraid or very apprehensive before you're going to execute that sort of final performance or whatever. I think something really amazing that I miss a lot about sport at the moment, and I miss about touch, is that feeling, even if it's just a park game, but that feeling before the whistle goes at the start of the game, where you're standing there looking the other, whatever happens next, the whistle's going to go and we're going to start playing, whether we're defending or attacking. And there's that moment of like, okay, we're doing this, and it's like a little bit of fear or apprehension where I don't know how this is going to go. We should win or we shouldn't win, or we're going to be whatever. And that feeling, whether you're in an orchestra and it's before the first note gets played, or if you're in a theater performance and the curtain's going to go up or whatever, that moment is quite an interesting, I think there's a real interesting psychology around that moment, where you've got to kind of overcome that fear and be brave and be ready to execute. But then also knowing that you've had that moment, and if it didn't go well, That's okay. Not to be ashamed of it, like you just said.
Definitely.
I think it's it's really there's a really interesting thing, especially in sport, because it's so easy to be very tangible in sport. You get a score, you either won or you didn't win. Like it's pretty obvious. And then, like you said, I think setting those other goals is what a lot of people who aren't involved in sport so deeply, they don't see that part of it. Did you make all the touches you wanted to make? Did you manage to sort of achieve the goals you set for that game? I love that you talked about Australia, New Zealand. For those that don't know, sorry, I have to keep referring to those that don't know in case there's some non-touch people in my life who listen to this. But Australia and New Zealand absolutely dominate this sport. I mean, England have kind of pushed them a few times in various divisions, but Australia and New Zealand, by and large, they dominate in touch footy. So if you get to play against them, there's a very good chance you're going to need to set some other goals than winning the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so I also wanted to talk to you a bit about kind of perhaps some of the things some experiences you've had in life where you feel like you've failed but you learned from it, and like how you moved forward from that. Maybe in touch you can use examples there, like where did you not meet the goals, maybe even in the organization of touch, where you were, because you were juggling so many balls and things, or in your work life as well, like, and some of the things you've learned from that and how you've adapted yourself to move forward.
Yeah, I think one of those, isn't it? Don't be afraid to make mistakes or admit them. We're human, it's what we do, and like I was saying, that kind of fail fast, learn from it experience, I think is key. Like I was saying, I recently just wrote a LinkedIn article just reflecting about my time where I was working at England Touch, and the feedback and thank you messages that I've had have been pretty overwhelming, to be honest. It's been kind of lovely to hear what other people saw that sometimes I didn't see. Being in the thick of it all, you make a small change, but it's made a big difference to the club or that player or whatever. So it's been really kind of heartwarming to kind of listen to some of that feedback. That it's very rare you get it whilst in a job, or you kind of, and it's when you leave, it goes, oh, you did these things. So it's been lovely to hear, but there's been big achievements that we've kind of done in terms of European Championships in 2018 I know that you were there, Nick, and it was probably the biggest. Well, it certainly was the biggest event that's ever been on this side of the world. Probably the best that I've been to. We invested a lot of time into the season. We in terms of behind the scenes, domestic season, getting all the footage, and then being able to present that to the BBC and negotiations that we had there. Again, just skyrocketed the sport for everyone to be able to see it. You go on the BBC app in the morning, you'd be the first thing there. It was a huge kind of thing. But all of those things, I think we've got to approach in terms of, well, from day one, you've got to write the bid, you've got to win the bid, then you've got to go on the BBC. It's like, well, them are like written down, and them are like, they're not achievable. We can't do them things. And it's that, taking that bite-sized chunks of can't eat an elephant whole kind of philosophy, isn't it? Focusing on like the process. The outcome's always important, but I think so too is how you arrive at it and kind of focus on that end goal, I guess, to some extent. I think sometimes it's difficult to keep your emotions in check. It's stressful at times. That affects your judgment. So I've always tried to kind of adopt that rational mindset to some extent, where you kind of step back from a challenge, give it a day or so, and then kind of go like clear head and go back into it. And I think I've got some really good confidence that I speak to regularly, give great advice, sometimes just sit and listen while I figure things out myself. I think that speaking out loud to somebody, even if they're just listening, makes a big difference. Like you said, I was playing in them squads as well as running the club, running my leagues, being a new dad. So life was pretty kind of hectic at times. So yeah, I think I don't know if I ever got to an answer of your question there.
No, but it's really interesting, and I think one thing I wanted to just jump back into is that when you talked about organising like a massive event like the 2018 Euros, that's a really good example. I mean, that was fantastic. It was like, I can't remember how many hundreds of teams from all over the world came, and not all over the world, all over Europe came, and some from other places in the world, right? There were some representatives from Pacific.
Yeah, so we had 63 teams, 17 countries, 1,500 athletes. Yeah. It's 20% bigger than the previous one, and 2020 was again another 20% bigger, 80 teams, 20 countries, just before COVID struck. And I'd added in an international series, so there was countries outside of Europe, so Chile, South Africa, Singapore, UAE, all of those countries that were keen to be part of that event, which, developing the sport wider for those countries that don't have that group of countries nearby that they play. But yeah, it was, a huge event, a big undertaking, and at the end of it was kind of going it's a while to kind of decompress and like look back and enjoy it after, because in the moment sometimes like you don't always enjoy that kind of middle ground, do you? Sometimes,
well, I guess you were probably juggling as the head guy of England. I know you delegated a lot, and you had people like Ben Powell, and who's another guy I really want to get on this podcast at some point, but I'm not sure he's going to be super keen. But he people like that running around doing things for you. But it is amazing, and I think the sort of almost, you'd say, audacity to think, let's get the BBC involved. Like, when that came up in a conversation at some point, that must have seemed like, come on. But the fact that you guys had got yourself in a position with people to be able to have that conversation and then say, let's give it a go, and I think, again, credit to you, but you like bite-sized chunks is the key there, right? What you said, because it's like process. Well, how would we do that? And probably your experience with the other sports helped, but I'm sure your experience amongst your team as well, and people you pulled on to find out, who do we need to speak to in the BBC? How do we go about doing that? How do we go about getting that sorted?
Because I think a few years ago, like 16, 17, because England Touch was still kind of small-ish and we were super agile to kind of go, I ring up one of the guys that are working with us, I'm like, got an idea, what do you think about this? Yeah, it's good. Monday morning, we were doing it, like, because we were such an agile kind of, the bigger it gets, the longer the processes take, and everything kind of slows down a bit. But back then we're like, we're going to live stream these games. Oh, well, we've got the budget. Just about, we'll break even. Let's go for it. Gets it in, next minute, everyone's like, oh, I want to jump on the commentary. I want to go and do this. Everyone's involved and they're kind of super keen to kind of be part of it. There's a bit of apprehension first, like, oh, what about refereeing decisions? Are they going to be right? Are they going to be reviewed? It's like, that's not what it's for. It's for enjoyment. It's like, we're out here, we're promoting the sport. Let's get out there and do it. And we went, the only way we can fill the time between the games is we need to create highlights reels, we need to create videos, we need to create just content. And we took 12 months doing, actually, if we do this right, then we've got a package to go to and go, this is what we're producing on virtually zero budget. This is the sport, this is how it's growing, and kind of go with this kind of, why not? You're doing a lot of new sports, we are one, kind of get involved. And they did, and we were like, are we doing this? So it was kind of, but we did. And like you said, the times when we kind of launched it and told people, like, my Facebook feed and social media channels were literally just that same link all day long. And I was like, brilliant, it's growing, and it was like, again, a big win for us. We didn't know if we would, I wasn't ever going to be upset if we lost that, because we had nothing to lose. We didn't have them originally, and then we got them in the end. So it was, I think that, again, it's not being afraid to fail, because what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, it was incredible. Just to give context, just in case, BBC, massive television organisation. I can't believe if no one's not heard of that, but the UK's biggest TV broadcasting channels, and they live streamed all the games at the main fields on their websites and stuff and apps. And it was crazy viewing, and we had players commentating as well, which was epic. It was so good to have that insight. I actually got to commentate on one of my team's games actually.
Nice, yeah. It's good though, isn't it? It's kind of it shows it from a different viewpoint because obviously the commentators don't know the players, don't know the sport so well. So having that kind of co-commentator from a coach, a ref, a player, it just gives that other insight. So they can be commentating on the game quite well. And they're going to go, oh, what did you think about that, Nick? What did they do here? And then you can go, oh, well, here's my insight. And it just brings a different flavour to the game, doesn't it, for the audience?
It was absolutely great. I mean, fantastic tournament, fantastic success, really. And obviously the weather was blazing. It was in my old university, actually, in Nottingham. So that's where I went to university. So I knew it well, and we all stayed on campus, and it was great fun. And the social was pretty fun as well. So it all went swimming.
Yeah, I didn't stay for too long there. I went there for an hour or so to show my face, and then I kind of crashed out. I'd been first there every morning, last to leave every day, playing in the daytime. So it was kind of decompress and go and have a gin and tonic somewhere on my own.
Win some medals, right? You guys won that one.
Yeah.
Right?
No, we got silver.
Oh, sorry. But you've got many goals
in the final. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, we've again. I think in the European Championships we've silver and gold in every time we've entered, and then either third or fourth in the World Cup. So I've got a bronze medal at the World Cup in 2015 Australia. But funny enough, when you were talking about the powerhouses of those kind of things, the very last game so I've been playing in the mixed 30s team for 10 years, and knew that I was kind of coming to the end of that cycle, going, well, you're 42 now, you probably shouldn't be playing in that category. But you don't like to kind of admit that to yourself to some extent, do you? But it was. The very last game we played was in the World Cup in 2019, blazing hot sun, like the temperatures in Malaysia were just ridiculous, and the humidity and everything. And our very last game was a bronze medal match against New Zealand. They'd got knocked out, so they weren't in the final, and we were winning. We were like 3-2 up going into half time, thinking, you know what, there might be a big upset here, and it was super kind of. That was, I think we got a bit of a way with ourselves. They ended up beating us, and we lost by a couple. But then it finished. They came and did the haka after the game. So that was our kind of swan song of leaving. It was a really kind of great atmosphere. To kind of just face off, and you've just been playing against these guys, and they're 2 meters away, and the tongs are out, and they're doing all of the kind of cultural dances. It was just a really good way to kind of finish that career in that team, but equally that tour as well was really good.
I've never made it to any World Cups, unfortunately, for various work related reasons, but it sounded amazing.
In 2 years' time. 2 years' time, you have to put your name down again.
Yeah, maybe so. Listen, I wanted to also touch on something I mentioned to you before, that I wanted to touch on this, because an interesting thing about touch is it's an honesty game. So obviously at the highest levels of the games you've just described, there's actually 3 refs. For those that don't know, there's a rotating set of referees who rotate through the game. It's a very fast game, so you need these 3 refs. But when you're playing park touch, for example, when you start out and you're just playing for fun, well, if you're lucky, you have a ref. In fact, I'd say if you're lucky, you have a full team at the very beginning. But but once you're playing like proper park touch in some of the tournaments and I forget what they're called, the tables, when you play against the sets of teams. You usually have a ref, and the thing about touch is it's an honesty sport. So touch literally means touch. If you touch someone's hair on their head and you feel it clearly, then you've touched them and it counts. And if you touch the ball that they're carrying, that counts as a tackle or a touch. And if you clip their boot, it doesn't matter if the person you're touching feels it or not. If you call touch and you've touched them, then that is a touch, and it means they have to stop, and the game continues from there, and you have these 6 touches. The interesting thing about that is what it throws up is a lot of like, you didn't get me, or I don't believe you, or that was a phantom touch. Is like the biggest dishonor you can be accused of in touch, because a phantom touch means that you made the call and you were lying. But it's an interesting thing because the sport works even though people play very, very competitively, and they push the limits of the rules. They push as far hard, they push they make strategies around how, because you have to retreat a certain amount of distance, you have to do certain things. If the ref's not looking a certain direction, you can maybe curve your run back instead of running straight in a straight line. All these things which you can bend rules around. But these things that require this honesty, I think it's interesting, and I wanted to kind of touch on ethics but in sport and your thoughts around that, and any learnings that you have on that or thoughts you have on that, because I think it's such an interesting sport for that. But also obviously there are times where people do break the rules and have to be disciplined and things. So yeah, if I could just throw that in your general direction and have you freestyle on that for a while.
It's I think ethics essentially is the system of moral behaviour, for want of a kind of better phrase. It kind of ensures that integrity of the sport, or just general good character of a person. It helps differentiate right from wrong, good from bad in sport and life. And I think it's a lot of it comes down to that fair play. I think you've got to respect the rules of the sport you're playing, your opponents, and controlling your actions, emotions on and off the field. Not blaming anybody else, or officials or whoever. And like you were saying then, that the sport I play or we play is based on honesty, and it doesn't really work without it. Obviously it does happen where people have kind of played dirty, for example, but it's very, very rare in the sport. And I think certainly, as I just mentioned previously, that there's more live streaming, so players are probably even less likely to do that now, because you can kind of go back and review things. And but yeah, I think it's just that doing the right thing. You hear the analogy when you've been to the supermarket with your shopping trolley and nobody makes you put it back. You don't get anything for taking it back. But the right thing is just to put it back, so the system works. So when you go next time, there is a trolley for you to take, and there's no benefit for doing it other than if nobody does it, the system fails. We had instances at the World Cup where there's players called a touch, the referee took the word for it, and they've had to think about it later and been back, and the game's finished. Luckily, it's not made a difference to the score, but they've been and apologised to the opposition, to their own team, and kind of said, listen, I was flustered, I thought I was letting you down, and I think there's a life lesson for him that they'll never do it again. And I think it takes some courage to kind of go, I did the wrong thing in the spur of the moment, but I'm holding on up now, and kind of I've missed touches and by a fraction, and I could have called it because it was there, wasn't it? But sometimes we've lost the game for missing that one. But I think that honesty and integrity of just knowing that you've done the right thing is key to all of them kind of ethics in sport and in life, isn't it? So even when it's just that integrity of doing the right thing when nobody's watching is what you can kind of hold your hat on, isn't it?
No, I agree, and it's not just. I guess actually, I have an example which you might find quite funny, and depending on who's listening, maybe people know who I'm talking about. Well, I'll just name him, Gareth Revel in Wales. He's like a giant, and he's so dynamic, it's ridiculous. The two things don't compute. He's a very, very talented player and extremely sort of gifted with the game. and I was tasked as playing for Switzerland to in a defensive role, basically to annoy him because he was so good in attack that it was like, if you get in his face and annoy him, you may be able to put him off because you're so annoying, is what I was told. And so I was basically, that was my mission in this game, and we were actually.
Just be annoying.
Yeah. So we were playing. It was he plays for Wales and is one of the integral players for Wales, and I was playing for Switzerland, and yeah, we were actually up at half time, not just because of my getting in his face, but I don't know that my getting in his face helped, but I was actually sin-binned for getting in his face and basically shouting and being a bit of an idiot, but yeah, it was funny because that. For him, I think it was like a year later we played again, and he was still annoyed about it. He found, I mean, we've since hopefully cleared the ground a bit, but he was still annoyed about it because I think for him that was ethically very much, that is not the spirit of the game. That is that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was an interesting experience because it was like my job from my coach was get in his face, and it's a interesting balance there. But yeah, it's quite funny because. He's not the type of person you want to pick a fight with.
Certainly not. No, certainly not.
He's massive. So, yeah. Anyway, but I thought you'd find that quite funny. But I wanted to move on a bit and ask a bit about sort of talents and qualities, because you've obviously seen and you've been so involved with the high performance stuff with England Touch as well, and what I mean by that is that obviously the best teams in England Touch are getting coaches and getting a lot of work, and in fact you have sports scientists coming in and doing various projects and stuff. With all of that going on, what have you learnt about sort of skills and talents, required to sort of execute strategy to win and achieve something incredible? What are those sort of skills and talents that you see as common in a person or a team that are going to succeed?
Yeah. So I think one, you certainly need to enjoy it. Like you spend a lot of time, money, effort, doing your sport, whatever it is, and I think to kind of not enjoy it is, I think you need to be able to pick yourself up, be in a good environment. I think going back to some of them things we said earlier, setting them smart goals, they can be small but ambitious. It's something to aim for, like the challenges I've just set for myself. I'm not competing against anybody myself, but I'll set some kind of personal goals, health and fitness goals, professional goals, financial goals. And it's the first time I've done it, and I've kind of enjoyed the process, something to reflect back on each month, and then at the end of the year to see kind of how I did. I think self-reliance and a bit of confidence is a trait that you see, and a quality you see in people. You need to remain accountable when it comes to your own goals and values. Understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are, act accordingly just to manage them. You've got to have a bit of faith in yourself as well. You need to believe that you've got what it takes to achieve them goals. You don't. I think if you don't have this type of self-confidence at the moment, I think everyone's got quality naturally, and I certainly don't always have it. But I think picking goals and some personal qualities, and you can cultivate them over time. I think you gain confidence if you work at it. I think probably another one is patience, and something that probably I am not great at. It's probably one I'm probably least patient person. Very little happens overnight, and certainly, like I said, going back a few years, everything was really agile. Here's an idea, Monday morning, we were doing it, and I think sometimes when things get bigger and more slowed down, it's like, but why are we not doing this Monday like we would normally do it? And it's just that kind of changing mindset sometimes. It's people sometimes are like kind of overnight success. Like, oh, this happened, overnight success. Well, that's how we describe, who became successful overnight and, instantaneously. But however, you've got to remember, like, the stuff that you do not see, it's probably taken them years or decades to kind of get to that level. You don't just come out of thin air and just be really successful at anything, like a pop artist or a tennis player or whatever it is. You don't just do that overnight. Like you see Joe Wicks, he's done stories about this overnight success, but then he's got a 10-year journey behind him of where he started in a park with like 3 people doing a boot camp. It's like he wasn't an overnight success. He's like, it looks like it, but he's done 10 years of graft. Yeah. And I think that probably the last trait on that would be resilience, and I think I touched on it earlier. I think all of us at some point are going to be knocked down, and you may have seen it coming, you may not. But I think that importance of just kind of getting up more times that you've been knocked down. I think when you lack that resilience, sometimes you run away from your problem. You avoid admitting them mistakes, and I think it takes away the chance to develop. Not being. I'm not phased if an idea doesn't work or you lose a game or whatever. It's quickly reassess, fail fast, learn from the experience, and move on. And I think some of that is trying to not take things too personally, and that's again something that I've had to work on a lot over the years. As you mentioned earlier about making decisions, and it's not always. You're never going to suit anybody, and like I said, it's a tough one. Being part of, I guess it's part of the process. You're the boss. You make that tough decision for the greater good, and you can't always please all of the people, all of the time, or even any of the time. Some people. So you've got to kind of realise that, I'm giving you a blank check, albeit on the wrong coloured paper. You know that them people exist in the world, and you've got to kind of just don't take that personally. Have that resilience, and like I said, a good network to confide in and open up to. Going back to European Champions, I were in so many caps there. It's tough to switch off at night. So I was playing, organising, dealing with disciplinary issues, and I recall a time that the outcome was from a disciplinary issue that I had to deal with, wasn't in the favour of one of our players, and then I'm getting abused by them and their parents, and for something that's literally not my fault. I've not been involved in the process. I've done my best to kind of appease everybody, but then next minute I'm back on the field trying to focus on my game, and I got very good at kind of compartmentalising those things. You switch off at night and the adrenaline disappears, adrenaline's gone, and that's when it takes its toll, I think. And I think sometimes being able to speak to somebody that's not judging you, that can offer an ear to listen to or a shoulder to cry on or that kind of thing is, I've been incredibly lucky to have those people around me, and resilience and that kind of thing, I think is a key trait. I mean, nobody plans to be average. Average always happens if you kind of fail to strive for that next thing, if you fail to kind of apply yourself and your skills to kind of become something different. I think those few things that I mentioned there, the resilience, the self-confidence and reliance, I think to me are traits that I see in those people that have probably achieved most, and kind of it's a bit of an indicator, I think, sometimes whether they are going to win and achieve that kind of next thing.
I love that. Yeah, it's come up quite a lot. It's funny. It reminded me a lot of. So I had a woman on who'd won an Olympic gold medal. Well, she won multiple medals, but also an Olympic gold medal in swimming. And she talked a lot about that resilience, and obviously, she talked a lot about how nobody wants to get up and jump into a cold swimming pool at 5 o'clock in the morning. Even the most keen Olympic swimmers don't want to do that on the cold mornings, but they just do it because it's all about how to move forward and that resilience. And I think she also talked about compartmentalizing, and she also talked about one thing which is kind of what you alluded to, which is finding that calm, in being able to find that calm in the moment you need it and focus on the task at hand. I think that is something which, you talked about it right at the start about time management and things, but it's being able to move from one task to another and really give your undivided attention and focus to that next task. That is a skill to develop, and that is something that is achievable. I think for most people, it's not something that is just a talent or a trait that you either have or you don't have. I think that is something that can definitely be developed, but it is certainly something you need to keep working at. And it's so easy to lose focus and lose that that task because of it. Now I also have this up here, which says it's not about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and still get up and keep going. I love that. I love that
Rocky
attitude.
Balboa.
It's the Rocky. I've got my posters behind me. Sorry for everyone listening on the podcast app going, what is he talking about? So, Gregg, we turn to wrap up now, but what I've found is quite cool, and I quite enjoy doing is throwing the sort of final question / offer out to my guests to give a bit of advice or a bit of sort of best thoughts you have on kind of anyone aspiring or looking to achieve something. Have you got any advice for anyone out there that is, I mean, it could be related to touch or it could just be general advice that you'd like to give?
I think probably just I hate to just keep repeating the same points, to be honest, but I think them kind of setting them smart goals is key. Be ambitious, but don't be afraid to fail. I think if you never try anything, and I think if anybody has never failed, they've never tried anything new. Believe in yourself. I think, like I say, you can cultivate those things over time. You like you say, you're not born with super confidence or etc. Those things get better over time the more you work on them, and sometimes it's just that sit down, reflect, and learn. I've always been kind of, it's not something I've done throughout my kind of life or career, but it's something I've kind of started to do a lot more over the last probably 2 years, I think, and kind of sit back, reflect. I've started to write a journal, so you can look back and you go, oh yeah, I remember getting over them things, and it's quite an interesting journey, really. I think sometimes just looking back and seeing, you don't see it when you're in the moment sometimes, do you? Because you're too busy in the moment than kind of sitting back and looking like what you have achieved or where you've come from, and sometimes it just needs that good network around you to go, yeah, but do you remember when you were like, yeah, we did, and now it's anything that you're doing has either grown as a person, or you've developed new skills, or the thing that you were working on has been a success, but because you're like we've done that next thing, and it's sometimes that reflection piece, isn't it, sometimes that you need to kind of look back on, and it's nice to have somebody kind of reflect it back, so you go, but you've done these really good jobs, and do you remember these things? You're like, So I think that's always, having that strong network around you, I think is certainly key.
That's cool. Thank you so much, Gregg. That was great advice. I actually, just thinking about reflecting back to when I first met you, I think it was when you were dressed as Where's Wally in fancy dress in Paris. Right? Yeah, in a tournament over there, reflecting on that. That seems like many years back now. Yeah, and I was going to say, I agree with you completely on the point about in the moment it's very difficult to look back, especially for anyone out there who's a father or a mother. It's of a young 3-year-old or around that age. It's extremely difficult in the moment to reflect. So good on you, Greg. So actually, one thing we haven't mentioned, which I'm quite surprised because I would like to make sure everyone's aware. You've set up On the 7 events, and if you could just talk a little bit about that, just introduce what that is, and for those of you listening who aren't already in a well-established touch country, this is really worth listening to, because it is possible for Gregg to engage you on this as well, because touch should be a sport which is grown, but also of course in the UK and around as well. So Gregg, if you could just explain what it is and tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So On the 7 events, basically, was just born out of a passion for kind of high quality, competitive touch events. So I guess the key driver was to kind of provide that competitive masters, seniors and youth events, because there's quite a lack of that in the UK and Europe in general, but there's an increasing appetite for it, and we've set that up just to kind of meet that demand. like a lot of the events that you would go to across across Europe basically, and that kind of circuit that people do, they're all mixed open events. And so if you fit in, you want to play, you get a bit older, seniors and masters events, or you're too young, those events are not really kind of happening. So we're kind of trying to focus on that participant experience, removing all of the kind of red tape and event admin, simplifying the kind of restrictions, etc. And these events are to run outside of any high performance national association, federation calendar. They're certainly not here to replace or undermine any of those events kind of, whatsoever. It's all about, that further development, supporting a growing and connected touch community, and basically just further opportunities to participate. So we're basically starting smallish in 2021, obviously due to COVID, as things kind of slowly start to open up, and then build to get to slightly bigger events as restrictions lift. I think because this year there's no major championships, but I think even when there is, it's still a great opportunity to kind of have these age categories playing more competitive games, and they can be used as, team bonding, selection exercises ahead of events, and generally just a good addition to a calendar that's, it's increasing. There's an increased demographic of that sport, and it's currently just not catered for. So this year we've got 6 events in England, from youth to masters, and then a senior masters event in Alicante in Spain in November. Touch and tapas, which I came up with myself, which I was quite happy with. And then a large club event in Abu Dhabi, and that is literally at the best stadium that you could ever imagine to play a touch on. I was lucky enough to go over last year, just before lockdown happened. The Middle East Championships, it was run 5 or 6 years ago. We're resurrecting that event, and we've got quite a few teams from the UK already signed up, loads of teams from the Middle East already signed up. So yeah, it's excited to get things off the ground this year, and see where things go. Maybe we can come up to Switzerland and run something for you guys as well. So
I'm in Norway now, and I'm hoping to get some touch over here in Norway. But yeah, Switzerland. I know I've got good friends in Switzerland and all in the Swiss touch community, and they could definitely benefit from something like that. There's a bunch of older men who are playing in the older men category. I will be gentle about their ages, but they're definitely keen, and I know that they went on a tournament to Spain. Yeah, so I think it's a great idea, Greg, and I think there's for sure around Europe there's loads of teams that because it's generally also a sport that's played after people have played competitive rugby. A lot of people then go to touch.
Yeah, 100% it is. Yeah, it's growing in that demographic every year. If you look at the World Cup, there was more seniors and masters teams than there were opens teams this year. The first time there's that kind of been that flip, and across the globe, basically, because as we were saying, the sport is run voluntarily in the majority of places other than 3 countries. Everybody's running as a volunteer, so to host these big events, it takes a lot of people, a lot of capacity, and those people are normally running their own club or they're doing their own thing, so they'd happily kind of reached out to us to go, could you host an event for us and with us on our fields over here? We want to help grow the sport a little bit more. We want our players to have an opportunity to come. We want people to come over and see what it is that we're doing. So one of the things that we're doing in Spain is we're setting up a new club at the venue in Torrevieja. Setting up a new club there. The night before the event, there's going to be like a coach session that we're going to put on, and then a little tournament on the Thursday night, and then the event's going to be Friday and Saturday. So it gives them opportunity then to come and watch what a higher level and more competitive environment is. So again, it's not just turning up to like other countries to kind of go, we're running an event and we're leaving. It's that growth of the sport a bit wider and kind of help out those countries that are, not able to. If you look at in Europe now, I'm not really sure who's going to put the hand up to host European Championships again, other than England. It's too big. It's too big for a lot of countries, or it's perceived to be too big. And to run it when you're just looking back and going, I've got to run it as good as the previous one, then it's a big challenge, and people will kind of go, well, as a volunteer, can I commit to that? Because we're kind of set up to assist those countries. Go, actually, I live here. We'd be interested in doing it. How do we partner, or how do we kind of get involved in doing stuff? So them are the kind of areas that we've been looking into, and had quite far down the line with a couple of countries that are interested in hosting events as well. So
that's exciting stuff. I can't think of a better man to be leading that charge. So I wish the very best for you and for that organisation. I hope you don't end up doing too many volunteer hours with it. I hope you get something out of it in the end. You definitely deserve.
All of these things start as a hobby, don't they? So we'll see. We'll see how they go.
But look after yourself as well. You've got that little puppy to look after now as well. So
I know I have. Yeah, she's lucky that she's in bed now. So fingers crossed. You never know.
Gregg, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really super appreciate it, and I wish you the very best with your future with On the 7, and I hope to get to play against you again sometime. You're a sneaky bugger on the field, and you're always scoring at my feet somehow. But I do enjoy playing against you, so I hope to get to see you and have a beer with you at some point.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. Much appreciated.
Bye. Thanks for listening. I wish you a very lovely day, evening, morning, wherever you're at in the world, and I hope that life is treating you great. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and give us a review on the podcast channels if you're there. Bye.